Welcome back to Breaking Lines, and it's another episode of our Whistleblower series where we've taken questions that have been submitted by our listeners in the various social platforms that we stream to, and we've had some really interesting questions come in this week, Gary. So we're going to start off straight away. It's from somebody who's worked in the game, Gavin Blackwell, a medic. So there are two questions. First question is, what's that first meeting like with the players? How does that get delivered by the manager or the head coach?
Wow, that's a big question because that could take a long time to answer. I'll try my best to cut it down, but it's a great question because I think it's like anything, isn't it? In any walk of life, people talk about first impressions, and I've certainly sat there as a player with managers coming into the building, and as managers, I thought within 2 minutes, I thought this guy's on it. I thought this is going to be really good. And as other managers, not too many, but they've done that opening talk, and I thought, oh, I'm not sure this is going to go so well. And it's really interesting how you can be so opinionated after a couple of minutes, but that is what we're talking about, aren't we? Those first impressions. So I think, for all of us, I think usually we go in as a team, don't we? So there's usually, myself, yourself, a couple of other members of staff, let's just say, for example, at previous clubs. So you all have to go in with that real enthusiasm, don't you? It's an awkward one sometimes when you pull into a new training ground and you don't really know anyone, you don't know where you're going. You tend to try and get in early before a lot of the staff are in, so you can sort of get your bearings and know where you're walking, because there's nothing worse than walking into the wrong room or a wrong meeting room, with a load of players in there you've never met before or whatever. So I think that's the first thing. You sort of orient yourself around the training ground and get in nice and early. I always found that the easiest thing to do was have something planned, ready, a structured way of approaching the players in the meeting room. And I'll come on to that in a second of how we would structure that. And then that might be at, say, 10:30. So, of course, you're going to go into the canteen and you're going to go and meet people and you're going to go and look people in the eye, shake their hands, and have a little bit of a chat with them. And there's some players you might know, some players, members of staff you might know, but there might be a lot you don't know. So yeah, I'd usually do the meeting in two ways. One would be with the staff first. So I'd have a similar theme to the way, this is what we're going to do. We appreciate the team's done really, really well or not so well or whatever. We're not coming in here to, we're coming in here to just change things and try and improve and work together. So you're sort of building consensus amongst the staff, and you're hoping that they buy into what you're saying. And of course, usually you usually have to shape that in a really inclusive way. So, we're all in it together. We all want to work hard, and that's how you would work anyway. And then, of course, the main one really is with the players. And I would essentially shape that in two different ways. I would talk to the players about what we will bring and what I think we can bring. And I'd usually be quite specific around, organisation, training variety, a clear style of play, a clear process in terms of the way we work. We'll give you 2 weeks, like you would do, David, where you'd get all the scheduling done so to the point that there's never anything to think about. There's never a lack of organisation. Yeah. So the players know when their day off might be in the next month or whatever that is. And you can shape so many different things that way. And then I would normally say, and in return, this is what we're looking for. These are the non-negotiables, essentially. And so the first bit, I suppose, is to hopefully try and excite them, hopefully try and motivate them into thinking, this is going to be good. These are maybe some of the things you might have done a little bit of research on what they maybe have done previously and try and fill a few of those spaces. If the previous manager maybe isn't as organised, then organisation could be something the players have been crying out for or the staff have been crying out for. So of course you have to be a little bit cute. But mainly it is literally, this is a non-negotiables, punctuality, respect, whatever all those things might be. I'm sure they're the obvious things, but and you might try and throw a bit of humour in there as well. My jokes are getting worse as I get older, unfortunately. I think it's called dad's humour, isn't it? Unfortunately,
we reached that point. We've
Yeah,
reached the point of bad humour, yeah.
yeah. And I've thrown the odd joke and I've looked around the room and there might be a 36-year-old chuckling, but the 18-year-old sat there thinking, he's just not funny. But that's never stopped me. Never stopped me, Dave. So, but often you would try, and we've done that before, haven't we, where you try and get a little bit of humour in there as well so that people can see that side of you and think to themselves, actually, this could be quite good fun as well. And there's all sorts of little ways of doing it. But yeah, what's your sort of observation been on those? Because obviously you've been part of some of those initial days. They can be quite awkward in certain ways, can't they?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things. It's when you're receiving a manager who's coming into your organization is very different to going in with one, of course, because like you just said there, as a player, you're weighing and measuring the manager. As members of staff, we are also doing the same thing. And those first few words that come out of your mouth and how you deliver them and the tone of voice, obviously having some humor is good. But some people want to come in and say straight away that, they're effectively the boss. Other people want to be good collaborators. And I've seen some people who've absolutely melted in front of the group, profusely sweating, stumbling over their words. And you just think, this is ended before it started. I've seen somebody else come in and they've literally tried to lay down the law inside 5 words. And you think, okay, this is not going to be really much of a collaboration. This is a very different type of manager. So they're all good. But then also, I'm going to extrapolate it out a little bit and say it's the same for us when we go in as performance staff or anybody else. Like our first sessions are being looked at. I remember my first session with you at Birmingham. I think I had more staff watching me taking the players for a fitness session than I had actually players doing it.
That was designed to put you under pressure, Dave. See how you could handle the pressure. That's why I told everyone to watch him.
That's all right. It was just spinning plates for me, But I also remember I got to one club. I think it was Colchester. Yeah, it was Colchester. First day, turned up, and they didn't have their own training ground. But the group was quite lively, like they'd just come back in from closed season. So, of course, they're all giddy from having not seen each other. But there's, of course, a new fitness coach in town. So it's like, right, let's see what this guy's about. And I've always gone with the old mantra of that players can't complain if they can't breathe. So just took them for a really hard run for the first 10 minutes, blew out all of their energy to be able to speak, and then just cracked on with it, So top tip there from Dave.
Like it, Dave. Nice.
Right, that now, of course, you go in, you see meet all the players and that, but there is a whole backroom staff. So second part of the question from Gavin is around the team behind the team. You've got multiple departments which report into you in some way, shape or form, medical, performance, analysis, you name it, recruitment. How do you go about as a manager having to manage all of those people and those departments as well as look after the team and coaching it and preparing for games?
Yeah, I think it's slightly different now in certain aspects, isn't it? Where if you go into a club with a sporting director, essentially that's a sporting director's role, but all those staff, you are still managing them daily. They're still in the meetings talking about training. They're still in the meetings talking about the players that you're working with. So it's very hard to completely distance the two. And I'm not sure that because you have a sporting director, it means you have to distance the two. Do you know what I mean? But obviously the role's slightly changed. I think the biggest thing is, you are only as good as your staff, because ultimately, and the way football's changed in certain aspects, there's so much more going on, isn't there? There's so much data, there's so much information, there's so many things that you guys have access to that you can use effectively to shape performance. So I think it'd be impossible now to manage all of that. And you need good people, you need good experts, you need people that are not only good at what they do, but also are very, very good with the players. You need some people that maybe are not so good with the players, but are very good at other aspects of the role. And you have to find that balance and complement within the staff, don't you? Because, it's like anything. And we've seen it before where sometimes as a manager, you're on a bad streak and then you might ask one of the staff anything to say and the assistant manager might come in strong to give his opinion. And then if the first team coach is that type of person, he's then coming in with his opinion after it. And then if you're not careful, the goalkeeper. So you've got to have different types of personalities that know when to come in, when to be strong, when not to be. Sometimes you don't want anyone that's really strong necessarily opinion-wise in one role, but you might have someone really, really opinionated in another role to challenge you. So I think, you have to complement each other. That's why so many managers have a group of staff that they trust and they work together with at a lot of clubs, because it's not easy to create that synergy. But I think you always have to give good people an opportunity to do the job themselves, and you have to trust them to do it, don't you? Because you can't, I think micromanaging people sometimes also doesn't allow you to flourish as a member of staff. So that's, tried to do it that way. You might tell me completely the opposite. But that's what you try to do. And that's why it's so important to have good people around you, but not only are good at what they do, but also are good people. I think you want to go and enjoy going to work.
Yeah, 100%. And I'd echo what you said there, is like, obviously, as departments have grown as well over the years, that actually trying to manage all of the staff around a first team now is practically impossible for one person to do, isn't it? Because the demands of the job are so much now. Like, obviously, a lot of your time will be spent not only doing the coaching, managing the players, trying to get ahead on recruitment. So there's probably key people that you'll just interact with, and then they'll manage their departments, won't they? And all of the people that work with them. Going back to your previous answer in the previous questions, yeah, you realise that you're getting on when the jokes just don't land anymore with the squad, and that's actually where you need young blood coming through, who are a little bit closer in age sometimes to the players, because they have some of that social interaction. So I think even how you construct a team is one thing, but also how you construct a staff is really important as well nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really good point, because actually you have to accept as well that, like, we've done it before, haven't we, where we'd be a little bit older, and sometimes you need to keep that distance between you and the players in certain senses, because we're the key decision makers in a lot of senses. But actually, sometimes different members of staff, they'll befriend the players and they'll get the players to do what they want to do. But from that aspect, for example, if you're a young S&C coach and you're working with the players, you might be the same age as the players. You might be younger than the players. So they might have a different way of doing it. And I think it's important that you have all types of different personalities and age profiles, because there's no right or wrong way, is there? You can manage by being best mates with all the lads. And obviously there's a lot of challenges come with that, but some managers will do that, younger managers. You can manage with hardly speaking to the players, and I've seen different people do it successfully in different ways. So, there's no right or wrong, but of course you have to choose your way of doing it,
And I think that's the fun part of being a coach, isn't it? There are so many different styles of how people deliver what they do. And at the start, certainly you want to obviously get close to the players when you're young. You almost treat them a little bit as friends. But then the older you get, you realise that actually respect is probably a little bit more, well, it trumps friendship, doesn't it? In the end, the players want to respect you rather than necessarily want to like you. But at the start, when you're starting out in your career, you definitely need the likes, because otherwise you're dead in the water anyway. So I don't know how I manage to get through it.
Like social media, you need the likes, Dave, don't you? What we've worked out with those first two questions is that basically I'm not funny anymore, and nor are you. So at least we've clarified that, haven't we?
So any listeners who've got any jokes that we could use for players over the years, please DM them, send them in. Right. Anyway, the next question is from Reese Quiggs. I really like this one. It's, do you have a favourite game that you've managed?
Oh, it's funny, because you often look at games and you think about the results, and you think about, strategically look at, okay, well, what about that one? But I just think sheer elation and sheer relief, I suppose. If I look back, when I was at Burton, so the first season I was at Burton as a manager, the owner said, no, what was it? So we got knocked out in the playoff semi-final by Bradford. We beat them 3-2 up at their place. They scored quite late, and I knew that goal would be crucial. And then they actually beat us at home, which was disappointing. But so we didn't go to Wembley that year. We didn't have a chance to get promotion. So the following year, I remember in the season, the owner, Ben Robinson, saying to me, you know, I've always wanted to take my team to Wembley. That's what he said to me. He never said I want to win the league, or he said, I've always wanted to take my team to Wembley. He said, because the previous time he was a chairman, or the previous time Burton had been to Wembley, I think it was in the FA Trophy under, I think, Neil Warnock, and he wasn't the chairman at the time. He was just the director there. So he said, I'd always wanted to take my team to Wembley. So anyway, so I thought, oh, God, no pressure. And anyway, so we got into playoffs again, and we played Southend. Phil Brown was the manager. And I knew Phil a little bit from my time at Derby as a coach and my time at Blackpool as a player. I had a lot of respect for Phil. In the first leg, we beat them 1-0, and I can remember having a little bit of a running battle on the side with him. And I made a couple of comments I probably shouldn't have made around the team talk he did at Hull. And sometimes as a manager, you know, sometimes you look back and you go, I shouldn't have made it personal.
Yeah.
But we're having a bit of a running battle, and you know, it was what it was. And then we were 1-0 up. The second, and our captain, I think, got sent off, so we were without our captain for the second leg. The second leg, I thought, you know, there's 10,000. To be fair to Southend, like, Roots Hall could get full, and you know, it could be a real atmosphere. There was 10,000 people there. And before the game, we had no programs in our dressing room. So I was really surprised. So somebody told me just before I did my press, somebody told me that they'd taken him out of the dressing room because the manager had put in there something around blah, 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 see you all at Wembley. So he told his fans, even though he was 1-0 down in the first leg, he'd said to his fans, see you all at Wembley. So, of course, at that point, I'm raging, even though I've kind of caused it. And you know, I was more to blame than he was. So I apologise, Phil. I apologise since. But anyway, so we played a game, and obviously now there's a bit of pressure on, and there's a bit of edge. And anyway, I think we drew or we won or whatever, but we went through. And I can just remember the feeling at full time. It felt like I'd got promotion. You know, it felt like a feeling of promotion because I thought we've taken the next step. The owner can go to Wembley. There felt like a bit of pressure. And obviously we had a chance to be promoted. So that game, having won that game, I would say that's the most enjoyable game I've ever won for different reasons. Again, public apology to Phil because he's had a fabulous career, and I didn't mean to cause any offence, but he definitely gave us motivation that day. The last laugh was on him because I think we lost in the final, and I think they went up the next season. So yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely sort of Damocles there from the owner, wasn't it? You know, like telling you that he's really disappointed that he didn't go to Wembley the year before, but telling you better get to Wembley this year or else, you know. So
that was how Ben kind of worked. It was like, yeah, I'd really like to go to Wembley. That was basically him saying, you better go one better because I've got a lot of friends and a lot of, you know, stuff waiting on this. So no, everyone had a great day, and I think for Burton, you know, it was a fabulous day out. Of course, you want to go and win, but at that point, it becomes a little bit of a lottery as well sometimes in those games.
Yeah, right. I'm going to be selfish here. I'm going to name one of the games. One of the games.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, I forgot to ask you that. So
we were in the Premier League. We're playing Middlesbrough at Harrow Road. You know, yeah, okay. You know, I've got a lot of games. Like anyway, not many Premier League ones, but hey, I'm going to pick one from there. So we're playing Middlesbrough at Carrow Road, and we performed pretty terribly for a good 78, 80 minutes. We're 4-1 down in the 88th minute, I think it was. And what's funny later is a good friend of mine, Paul Bonus, friend of the show, who was with Middlesbrough at the time. He was their head of analysis, and Steve McLaren was looking after their team, and they were on a week's, because they got knocked out of the FA Cup or something like that. So they were going for a week to Dubai off the back of the results. So they're 4-1 up with 2 minutes to go. Bags are packed, straight to the airport. Anyway, we score a late kind of consolation, you'd think. So it's 4-2. And then 3 minutes later of the 5 minutes of added time, we nick another. So it's now 4-3.
Wow.
And then we get a corner. And Adam Drury, who literally, if there was anyone to stay back for a corner, was Adam. Normally you put the goalkeeper ahead of him. But anyway, he's just decided to go up and he's wandered into the penalty box and stood on the 6 yard box in the middle of the goal, unmarked. Ball comes in, nods it in, 4-4. So in a week where we saw Everton crumble from being 2-0 up to losing 3-2 in about 5 minutes, Middlesbrough gave them a good run for the money on that day. So yeah, that was, if back then you didn't unload the bench and everybody ran on the pitch, it was probably as close as we got to it. But
We had similar to that at Derby, didn't we? Remember when we went with Birmingham? We were 2-0 down, absolutely miles out of the game. I think we get a penalty in the 92nd minute, don't we? And then the referee just keeps playing like more time, and what you're thinking, surely he's going to blow the whistle soon. And I think a ball goes in the box. Darren Randolph, I think, heads it in the box. And, someone else scores, and a crowd. Those games are the best sometimes, aren't they? Because the crowd go absolutely loopy, and it feels like a win. So yeah, I can certainly empathise with that game.
yeah, the best of that was when Adam Drury celebrated. He had no idea how to celebrate, So that was comedy value in itself. So right, next one. This one comes from Joe. No name added. I don't know where it's come from Joe. But anyway, it's actually directed to me. So it's a selfish question of me asking myself a question. So it's DC. What piece of data do you track during match days? And do you do it in real time? Well, if anyone observes the bench, not that it's that exciting, but you will often see nowadays that there are iPads and tablets on the go, laptops. So what you'll see on the bench nowadays is the coaching staff will have a delayed video replay on the go. So the coaches will be watching video of the game where they can pause, rewind, tag different events in the game. Now, over on our side, we're tracking the GPS units that are on the player's back, or the second spectrum data, which is used to track all of the players on the pitch throughout the game. So essentially what we're looking at on our side is the physical metrics that the players produce. So how far have they run? How hard are they running, which is kind of an intensity measure. We look at how much high-speed running they're doing. And then a couple of other things that are important, how much sprint they're doing, because sprint is really demanding on the players. It's quite exhausting, as most people would know. If you've got to sprint for a bus, it's bad enough. But if you've got to chase a winger who's doing multiple attacks at you during a game, that's certainly tiring. And the other one, of course, is how fast they run, so their max speed that they've run at. Because if we see players who are sprinting a lot but sprinting at their top speed all of the time, they become a little bit of concern around potentially injury. And the great thing nowadays is, like, obviously I'll share that information into you across the game, so I'll tell you kind of how the game has started. Was it a particularly fast start, or is it quite steady? Are we expecting that across a game the players will be able to go deeper in the game with less fatigue, or are we going to see certain hotspots throughout the game where we think, okay, this is a demanding phase of play potentially for both teams, in which case we should expect that there might be a bit of a pacing period just after that. So that's generally what we do, and then I'll feed that into you regarding substitutions, who might be more of a target for being replaced earlier based on their physical stats. But of course, that's where we come up with a consensus, because you as the manager, it's not always about the physical stats, is it?
No, it's not. But I think what's really important from a manager's perspective is that you're almost there trying to predict what's next, aren't you? You're trying to predict what might happen. So what I find really interesting, some people hate data, don't they? Some people hate the numbers. Some people want to go by, like, we've had coaches before that just want to go by the feel of the game, and they'll go, well, so what? Like, they'll just judge it on their own sort of history and how they've sort of been brought up with the game. But I've always felt as though you want the information, because then you can make at least critical, informed decisions. So I think for me, you're a predictor of what might be next. So you might say to me, our volume is really, really high. And what really you're saying, aren't you? Look, we're either going to drop off and lose intensity, so maybe you might need to think about making a substitution, or if it's an individual player's case, he might now be at risk because his games. So let's take someone like Benno at Millwall. So let's take someone like Mason. Often at 60 minutes, you would say to me, he looks like he's done so much in the game so far. He's done X. He's not done X for 4 months. We had a spell where he hadn't played 90 minutes for a long time, had we? And at that point, you're having to give me that information because sometimes as a manager, you're involved in the game. You might be 1-0 up, so you don't really want to make a change. But that doesn't mean to say you shouldn't make a change. And again, it's about keeping players healthy, isn't it? It's about making sure you've got the right amount of energy on the pitch, particularly in the latter stages. So I find that really, really interesting how often you've done it where you've predicted something and maybe, let's say I haven't listened, and then 10 minutes later, the player's cramping up. So you might be saying he's doing a lot of sprint. We need to get him a gel on. I think you might need to think about making a change. And I might say, you know what, let's just go another 10 minutes, Dave, because we might be 1-0 up after 60 minutes and we want to get as far down the line as we can while the team's playing well and performing well. But often that's actually come to fruition where the players then fell down clutching his hamstring and you're sat there giving it the old, well, it's just information for you. It's up to you how you use it, which is basically your way of saying, I was right after all.
My Mr. Meg crystal ball comes out.
Yeah, you've got a crystal ball as well.
And then, of course, the player comes off and says, there was nothing wrong with me. Of course, they always say that. They always profess, why was I getting subbed? But
yeah, there's other players you don't need to say anything because at 60 they're going, the physio said I can only play 60 minutes. So let's blame the physios now because the player's almost subbing himself. And you're like, this is a league game. You're subbing. You can't sub yourself. Just keep playing until we tell you otherwise. But of course, such is modern science that sometimes the players are aware of these situations.
Yeah, I've actually been fortunate enough to see some of the stuff that's happening in European competition now, and some of the real high level thinkers at Champions League level, and the systems and processes they have in place for looking at not only what's happening in this game, but they're modeling the game based on previous games where they played that type of shape against the opponent who's played that type of shape, and based on how the game starts to unfold, they are almost saying, at 64 minutes, we can probably expect that this player is going to be flagging and we need to be considering a substitution. Now, of course, that's in the kind of golden hot spot of when you're making substitutions earlier, but they actually had developed analytics which very quickly during the game they were saying this is an overreaching game for this player. In terms of their ability to maintain this, they're going to struggle. So it could even be the point that you're looking nowadays at, okay, you've got 9 subs. You've got 4 opportunities if you look at half-time as well. So maybe being strategic around your substitutions based on that information. Look, if this game keeps going like it is, because this opponent maybe is placing additional demands on the team through their physicality, their team shape, their strategy or whatever, that actually this isn't the game for that player. And certainly we've seen that with other sports like in rugby now, where South Africa have shown that actually if the game is not unfolding how the coach expects it to be, and they need to make a substitution after 20 minutes of the game, that's what the game demands. That's something that would be really interesting to see if football ever starts to go down that way.
Well, we did it a little bit, didn't we? Because it's like anything. If you've got 5 substitutions and you can do it in 3 different ways, if you don't count half time as one, let's say you've had an injury in the first half, you've got 2 substitutions left and 4 players left to bring on. So there always comes a point where I think your decisions are made twofold. One is around the result and what's required from a tactical perspective, and one is required around the result and what might be needed from a physical. I know that you can't necessarily separate the two, but let's say I know the opposition have a quick winger, and let's say I know they're going to bring him on for the last 10 minutes, and I know our fullback playing up against him sometimes struggles late on games. I might need to save one sub for the right player at the right time to go on and deal with that physicality. So again, it's always shaping and pulling away at your decision making within the game. And the fact that you can understand that from the sideline and understand that as head of performance, I think is vital. And like you say, you need to use that information to make even better informed decisions.
Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting one for a future episode, which is when you've picked a team because you're expecting an opponent to play with certain players, then they turn up and they're not playing that player and they're not playing that shape, and you're like, I've literally strategized around game plan A and they've gone with game plan D. Like, we've got the wrong people playing in the wrong game. How quick can we get this changed up?
Good job. We've usually got game plan E, which is code for panic.
Yeah. Where's that one?
We plan for.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Moving on from that. So, foot graphics on one of our socials. I sent this one in. Gary, has football changed much since you were playing to now managing? If so, what are the main differences? Well, I suppose the ball's like plastic now rather than like cowhide. So
no laces in the ball. No nails in your boots. Yeah, no, I'm not quite that old. I think the biggest thing there's two things that I think spring to mind. One is the pitches, because even though I'm not 100 years old, but the pitch quality, the pitch quality that you train on every day, and the pitch quality that you play on is massively advanced now. So I think, that certainly helps. I started out as a player or quite early in my career at the baseball ground, and there was hardly any grass on the pitch, at certain points of the year, and that was well known. Cambridge, we actually trained on the pitch because that's what the manager wanted us to do sometimes on a Friday, the old classic. Because the style of play at Cambridge wasn't total football, believe it or not, under John Beck.
I think it was called unique, wasn't it? Unique football.
Unique. But successful football it was. Depends on how you look at it. But actually, the pitches often were really, really poor. So, it challenged you in a different way. And I think the other thing that I really regret not having really was the support services. We spoke about staff earlier. I think the ability now for a player to improve and reach their maximum, is so achievable now if the player has the right mentality, because you have so much access to different experts within, let's say, a championship football club, or supposed experts, let's say. They've got the job claiming they're experts anyway. But lots of experts and good people around. Whereas back then, you might have had a fitness coach. Do you know what I mean? Who'd, I don't know. I mean, he might even have worked in a gym, or he might have, whatever. He might have come into that role for different reasons and been very, very good. But that was just that one person. So I think unless you had that foresight as a player to bring these people in, which most people didn't, you probably achieved somewhere near your max, but not your max. And that's the only thing I look at. I think if I was a player nowadays, I think I'd have been a much better player, because of that reason. So those would probably be the two obvious things that I think spring to mind.
Yeah, I've got flashbacks to the Four Yorkshiremen sketch from Monty Python here of like back in our day it was worse, because obviously the pitches that the players train on now, they're carpets, they're so good. I mean, I remember about 3 years ago, we went down to play Watford with Millwall, and it was almost like a crime against sport to have actually played on the pitch. It was so good. It was like, it should have been hung in a museum or something. And you think like, you often hear coaches say, if you can't play football on that, and I think that day we saw that some players couldn't play football on that, but the facilities are now so good. Everything from the training grounds and the catering and the gyms and the training pitches to you go to the match pitches now, and it's an art and a science now, isn't it? Groundkeeping. You just look at it and you think, like the guy who's just gone from John Letwidge, who's gone from Leicester to Man City, and the standard of pitch that they produce. Of course, you want the best players playing on the best surface, but I dread to think how much better that can get, because, again, if you go back 20 years ago when you're playing, ish, and you go to today and you think how much it's developed there, and then go 20 years in the future, how much better can the pitches actually get? But yeah, that's a really good one now. Yeah, I suppose pitches and staff. Yeah, there's so many more. I saw a squad photo last week of the first squad I was involved in, and there were 6 members of staff. Now there are 6 members of staff in each department minimum.
And the kit as well. What about a kit? The kit used to be, I've seen a picture of you, Dave, not that long ago, and you looked like you was about 10 because the kit was about 8 times too big for you. But actually realised it was just the kit and it wasn't you. So, the playing kit was the same, wasn't it? Everything was like a triple XL. It was horrible to wear, but you didn't think anything of it. Just put the shirt on. You were proud to wear it.
I will share that, but we'll share one of you wearing like maybe one of the big Derby Premier League kits.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they were like wingsuits maybe, but there we are. Right, last question of the day is from Elliot. It's not my son Elliot, but it's from a different Elliot. So this one's towards me again, but I think it's for both of us really. Have you seen any correlation in regard to performance metrics versus points won? Like running more, does that get you more points? Maybe also on the technical side, let's talk about possession or passing or things like that as well. We knew a few years ago, didn't we, as when we started working together, that the style of play that we were playing with, that we knew if we had a certain amount of sprint distance in a game, more often than not, that led us to win games. But it was even more than that, wasn't it? We knew that if we had hit certain metrics in our training during the week, that affected the sprint distance, and that got us points. So we had a correlation over the 2 years at Birmingham, and certainly into Derby as well. It kept going there, where we knew if we had done certain types of work during the week, that would translate itself into games at the weekend where we would win.
Absolutely, and I think that was probably the most obvious metric at the time, wasn't it? I mean, I think it depends on club to club, and we found some really interesting patterns, and that's why the data is so important, isn't it? We've been at some clubs where you need to have more possession, and that correlates to winning games and creating more chances. We've also been at other clubs where no matter how we tried and how hard we tried, we actually won games when we had less possession. And there was certain opposition where they would win. Let's say I remember back to that Forest game we spoke about with Matt Smith about. And I remember distinctly that Forest didn't win any games that season, or very few games, when they had more possession. And we always seemed to win more games when we had less possession. So to me, that was stupid to go to Forest and try to dominate possession. So we actually designed a game plan to let them have the ball. And we counter-attacked them, and we transitioned, and we exploited different areas, and we ended up winning the game comfortably. So that's finding some data that shapes how your game plan's going to look. And it worked in that case. So I think, again, there's certain clubs and certain types of groups of players that favour certain styles and win more games that way. There's no doubt at the top end of a game and the top end of every division, possession correlates to getting promotion, but there's definitely a stat in there somewhere. But I think that's I don't think that's that possession correlates to promotion. I think that's more the best players in the best teams get promoted, and therefore, because they're the best players, they have more possession anyway. I don't necessarily think that's always a style of player, style from the manager. So, but it is interesting to see those patterns develop, isn't it? And we've spent a lot of time looking at those patterns and trying to quantify which ones basically win your games, because that's essentially what it's about.
Yeah, but and at the same time, as you say there about teams who win with a certain style, but they're also the teams with the biggest budgets. And that's not making excuses. It's just part of the fact of teams that get promoted most often out of most leagues have got the bigger budgets where they are recruiting the better players who can potentially play better football, if you want to call it like that, but they know how to win more often. That's why they're being better players. And therefore, whether it's budget, which creates the performance, which gets you the results, or whether it's just having those key players in the team. We've often always noticed as well, though, we see other teams who try and have a philosophy of how they play, and actually their philosophy can be exploited by the fact that they're not good at countering the thing that some other teams are good at. So where two possession teams come against each other, yeah, they kind of butt heads. But when a possession team comes up against a counter-attacking team and you think they're maybe not so used to this, so that can be another challenge as well, can't it? Where you start looking at someone who's got a technical dominance versus someone who might have a physical dominance, and then who's going to win out in that kind of that battle as such.
Yeah, and also when you haven't got a big budget as a club, sometimes you have to find different ways to win different games. It's as simple as that. To me, that's what the manager, head coach's job is. Of course, you want a style of play that everyone loves, but at the same time, you also have to find. When we went in at Derby, it was very easy to go and move the ball quickly. It was very easy to go and create lots of chances because we had good players. It's as simple as that. And but when you go to somewhere like a Millwall, it's perhaps not quite as easy. So I always used to think, so I used to see teams playing possession-based football, but didn't have the players to do it. And I loved playing against those teams because you could set traps, you could press, you could nick the ball in good areas where they were very, very easy to exploit. And the other way round, some teams would be very direct against you and they were very predictable. So listen, everyone's judged on the results, but sometimes your style of play has to fit the players that can do it, and you have to have the players available to be able to execute any style of play, don't you? So
absolutely. I suppose flipping the question 180, there are definitely things that cause you to lose games, that lose you points. Certainly not having the physical capacity to last out to the end of the game. Potentially also being slow out of the blocks at the start of each half and you get exploited early by opponents. They are things that can lose you games, lose you points, and ultimately lose your jobs.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you're definitely right. I mean, we looked at one thing that you looked at quite closely, didn't you? But little 5-minute segments of games and what they look like in terms of the biggest, most explosive part of a game. And we knew that against certain teams, the Burnley under Company, you had to be able to run a certain intensity level for those 5, 6, 7 minutes. Otherwise, you end up conceding, which is what happened to us. So yeah, you use data wisely, don't you? Some things, very few, but some can really, really shape the outcome quite consistently. And they're the bits you're looking for, aren't they? You're looking for your sweet spot of how you want to play and what's the most effective. And it's an ongoing debate, really, because it doesn't always stay the same either. It can often change as a season goes on.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great 5-6 questions there that we've had in from the listeners or the viewers. So hopefully people have gained a lot from that. Bit of a change to the normal one, but the third episode of Whistleblowers that we've done. So make sure you check out the other 2 episodes. We'll link those at the end of the video. Or if you're listening, if you go to the channel page, you'll see that there are previous episodes of Whistleblowers. So keep an eye out for when we promote the next version. So if you've got any burning questions, have them ready for then. Thanks, Gary.
Cheers, Dave.
Okay, see you soon.